Good morning, everyone. It is our pleasure to welcome you all to the webinar on comparative world literatures. We are delighted to have Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, West Bengal, Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am. We have an esteemed panel of speakers joining us today. Let's give a warm welcome to the renowned writer Ambika Ananth, ma'am, and an eminent writer and lyricist, Professor Laksmisree Banerjee, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
As we all know, that comparative world literatures understand the complexities of cultural representation, identity, and power dynamics in literature. So, to understand the complexity, we are going to have this wonderful intellectual session today. So now, without any delay, I must say it is my great honor to introduce the chairperson of this webinar, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, Professor Nandini Sahu, who is a renowned academician, poet, and creative writer. With an illustrious academic background, she previously headed the School of Foreign Languages at IGNOU, New Delhi. A prolific author of almost 23 books, Professor Sahu is a best-selling author on Amazon. Her academic achievements include double gold medals in both graduation and post-graduation, as well as the prestigious literary award gold medal from the Vice President of India for her outstanding contribution to English studies. She has recently received the Michael Madhusudan Academy Award and the Lifetime Achievement Award in the year 2024. Her latest publication, Medusa, showcases her literary expertise. Additionally, recently, she has been honored with the Tagore Samman in the year 2025, yes, this year, and the honorary fellowship from the International Academy of Ethics. Professor Sahu's research expertise spans new literatures, critical theory, folklore, and more, solidifying her position as a leading authority in India in English literature and education. Now, I would like to request Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am, for the inaugural speech. Ma'am, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Paramita. And definitely many congratulations to you for holding this lecture series so seamlessly. I feel privileged to welcome Professor Laksmisree Banerjee and Dr. Ambika Ananth to be a part of this very important lecture series on comparative world literatures, which has created ripples across the countries, across disciplines. We have broken the discipline boundaries through this lecture series. When I joined Hindi University in January this year, we had a brainstorming with our faculty and we decided to do something very innovative, very creative, inclusive, and something very flexible through which we can accommodate many disciplines in a new multidisciplinary approach, and then we can create a new discipline. That is how we created comparative world literatures. There are departments where you have comparative literature. There are departments where you have world literatures, but I doubt if there are many departments on comparative world literatures where we are taking many languages, Indian languages and foreign languages and many such through the comparative pedagogy. And the lecture series started with many eminent scholars, and today we have the proud privilege of informing our participants and our listeners that we have already had more than 40 speakers from Hindi University internal faculty members. Internal faculty members are contributing in a big way to this lecture series, and also the best brains in the country from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, as well as many speakers outside the country. And they have spoken on varieties of themes like the pedagogy of comparison. What kind of texts can be compared? Can we compare two English writers for that matter and call it comparative literature? Or can we compare two Hindi writers? Or when it is comparative literature, what should the linguistic strategy They have spoken on linguistic strategies and then the theorization. Can we take new historicism? Can we take cultural materialism and speak about comparative literature vis-a-vis those two? So day by day, our our ideas about comparative literature is getting clearer and wider. We are having a clear vision, a clear direction of what we are going to do in the new upcoming department on comparative world literatures in our university. And when we launch that department, we'll certainly need the help of both of you being two best brains in the country. And this is
Yes.
once again my proud privilege, like already Paramita pointed out, that we are inviting two eminent scholars. And Ambika, Ananth, let me, I will be a little bit personal. I cannot help it. I know Ambika Ananth since I think more than a decade now. I noticed her work on social media and many places. We got published in many magazines, journals like the Indian Literature and Sahitya Academy and Muse India. In many places, we got published together, and somehow we exchanged our numbers, and then we started talking. And in due course of time, I discovered that she takes interest in many subjects, like I do, like Indian culture and cultural studies and bhakti literature, and those kind of things that resonate with my thoughts. So probably it's like a twin soul where you can understand what the other person is trying to tell through literature and creative writing. And as far as my personal relationship with Ambika Anand goes, it's a very beautiful relationship. Uh, just now before the meeting began, I was telling her that in English writing pedagogy, or in English writing scenario, probably no one is competing with no one. People are writing in their standalone platforms. Then she said, also it depends on the person that you are. So she was so kind to say that. So she's a very kind and a very compassionate person, very soft spoken. Today I saw her for the first time. We have never met, so it doesn't look like we have never met because we have been sharing work forever. So I asked her to send me a research paper, a poem, and she also does that. And she reads my publications. I read her publications. So Ambika, I am very happy and honored to welcome you. And today you are going to talk about translating Bhakti literature, which is, never a linguistic transfer. It's a deeply critical engagement. Bhakti literature is very deep and very layered. You are translating Bhakti literature and you're going to talk about your work vis-a-vis Bhakti literature translation. And we have a translation studies department. I'm sure that your presentation is going to be very helpful for the colleagues and for the students of the translation studies department. And I'm glad to share here that many of our students from the translation studies department are getting placements as Rajbhasha Adhikari in many
Oh,
places. And
wonderful.
I'll try to connect them with you. Maybe they can seek some guidance from you for their future research and all of that. So after you have spoken, I'll be in a better position to talk about your presentation. Till then, most welcome and my regards to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Very, very
Yeah,
kind of
and
you.
thank you. And when it comes to Professor Laksmisree Banerjee, well, she's a role model for me. I have known her since I think 2 decades or more. I think everyone in the country knows her. She is a name. Everybody knows her. I met her in person for the first time in All India Women's Conference in South India, isn't it? In Central University, Karnataka, in Tamil Nadu.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Thiruvarur.
we met there for the first Tiruvur. Yes, we met there for the first time. That was also more than
Yes.
10 years.
No,
Uh,
much more.
yes, and much more, probably 12, 13 years. Then I used to be a young girl and she was a vice chancellor. And I was awe inspired by looking at her aura, the way she spoke, the way she carried herself, she presented herself. So in the beginning, when I saw her, I said, okay, this is how a vice chancellor should look, or this is how a vice chancellor should speak. And then in due course of time, I discovered that she's a very simple and a kind-hearted person. She has a word of love for everybody. I have never heard her speaking negative or bad things about anyone, and I have spoken to her for hours and have learned so much from her. When I became vice chancellor, she called me and she guided me. She told me a few things that Nandini, you should take care of these things because she already was a vice chancellor. So as I said, she has been an inspiration for me, and everybody loves her. And she takes care of her family in a very beautiful way. The way she is connected with her family. We already had one lecture scheduled with her. She could not do that for some, complex issues at home, which she explained. And then I was even more in love with her, and I respected her more for keeping her close people so comfortable at the cost of getting some discomfort for herself. She is that kind of a person, and ma'am, we are so inspired by you. And today I'm glad to inform the participants here that Professor Laksmisree Banerjee is going to talk about comparative world literature through the writings of Tagore, and connect those with Sufism, Romanticism, structuralism, humanism, naturalism, and all those theoretical and pedagogical frameworks. And who else but Professor Lakshmi Sri Banerjee is the right person to talk about Tagore. She being a Tagorean, a big time Tagorean. I'm looking forward to listening to you. And when we design our syllabus, ma'am, we will certainly take your help, your support. So I leave it to Paramita now to formally introduce and welcome both the speakers. And let us listen to both of them once again. Thank you and namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce the renowned and eminent writer Ambika Ananth ma'am, who is a bilingual writer, poet, journalist, reviewer, and a wonderful translator. She has 17 published works, both in English and in vernacular language, Telugu, in various genres like poetry, prose, translation, short stories, and creative writing. Not only that, she is also one of the founder editors of Muse India, a popular literary e-journal that showcases Indian regional literatures in English. Her English poetry has appeared in many national and international anthologies and in the Journal of Indian Literature of Sahitya Akademi. She regularly contributes her articles to English dailies like Deccan Herald, Hence India, and The Hindu. She has translated many titles of children literature for Pratham books and for Katha. Throughout her career, Ambika Ananth has received recognition for her literary contributions, earning her a reputation as a very talented writer and translator. So now I would like to request Ambika Ananth Madam for the very engaging lecture. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paramita, for the beautiful introduction. Namaste and good morning to all of you. My hearty greetings and gratitude to Professor Nandini Sahuji, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, for giving me this exciting and inspiring opportunity to speak here. Before I present my topic, I wish to read out a verse in Telugu and its English translation to strike a chord at the very outset and to emphasize and validate on the points that I'm going to present now in the webinar. The verse or the Sankirtana is by a 15th century saint poet, Karlapaka Annamacharya. It goes like this. Alamelu mangani abhinava roopamu జలజాక్షు కన్నులకు చవులిచ్చేనమ్మ గరుడాచలాధీసు ఘనవక్షణము నుండి పరమానంద సంభరితవై నెరతములు చూపి నిరతము నీ నాథుని హరుషింపగా చేసితివి గదమ్మ శశి కిరణములకు చలువల చూపులు విశదముగా మీద బెదజల్లుచు రసికత పెంపున కరగించు ఎప్పుడు నీ వశము చేసుకొంటివి వల్లభు నోయమ్మ రట్టడి శ్రీ వెంకటరాయునికి నీవు పట్టపురాణివై పరుగుచు వట్టిమాకులిగురించు బలపు మాటల విభు జట్టిగుని ఉరమున సతమైతివమ్మ. I think you need to mute your mic.
अच्छा
Please mute your mic.
ये म्यूट कहाँ से करेंगे?
There is a, yes, there is an option below.
So,
Mic. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
um,
Yes.
so as I read out this Sankirtana, I would like to ask, how many of you have understood this particular Sankirtana? Because it's a very beautiful composition by the same poet praising the reigning queen of Lord Sri Hari. But now I'm going to present it in English, the retelling or the translation of the Sankirtana. Please do take a listen. O Alamelumanga Sri Lakshmi, your ever youthful form gives immense pleasure to the lotus eyes of Lord Hari. O Alamelumanga, your ever youthful form gives immense pleasure to the lotus eyes of Lord Hari. Residing on the majestic chest of the Lord of Seven Hells, overflowing with blissful ecstasy, eternally showing your feminine charms, you enchant your Lord with happiness. Eternally showing your feminine charms, you enchant your Lord with happiness. Your glances, which are as cool as moonbeams, by casting them on him abundantly and melting his heart with increasing passion, you make your Lord lovingly submissive. For the amorous Lord Sri Venkatachalapati, you being the eternal reigning queen, with your sweet love talks, which are ever rejuvenating, you win him over and reside on his loving chest eternally. So, now, how many people would have understood this and enjoyed the beauty of this Sankirtana, which had the beautiful cadence and lovely flavor and bhakti, romance, everything. It's a combination of so many things. And now, when I read the original, I don't think many would have understood. Even the Telugu people per se, they may not, because this language is kind of ancient and archaic, but it contains so much of beauty. This bhakti literature should reach larger readership. So that is the main purpose that I started with this. So why translate bhakti literature of India? Ralph Waldo Emerson said, poetry is the language of God, and he considered the poet a seer, a reformer. When devout poets and seers write verses eulogizing God, imagine the power and beauty of those verses. Poetry is a medication that never expires. It is very true of bhakti literature filled with verses that work as ambrosial medicine. These are timeless and priceless. Pure bhakti cascading down to a level of human experience in each verse. Even to a general reader who is not a devotee or a votary, these verses offer a great read purely with their poetic sense and beauty. Retelling in English, the bhakti literature of saint poets of India contributes to world literature in a very significant way, as literature is said to be a great catalyst in bringing together world's cultural and social diversities and helping in the integration process. Bhakti poetry in various regional languages will be alive and thriving through English translations, making it a living tradition for the posterity. Translating the lyrics of saint poets is to give a feel of the Indian mystique to the global readers and audiences. Devotional literature, which usually has an intense voice, can be called as by the people and for the people to traverse on a spiritual bhakti path. The founding principle of translation is bringing regional and world literatures and the multilingual expressions closer. For any work of regional literature, translating into English is a definitive step towards gaining global readership because translation is such a tool which links people, cultures, literatures of the world in a global network, a much needed cultural synthesis, that which the world always requires. Indian writing in regional languages continue to suffer the fate of anonymity in the West, but when showcased in English translation, gets phenomenal recognition. That's the very reason that the Bhakti literature should be translated into English. Though translating religious texts is a complex procedure, as words and expressions attain independent status and significance, and as many words used by the same poets, the verses may be loaded in spiritual meaning and may be culture specific, but they need to be translated for preservation and propagation. One can take the help of few scholars and ardent devotees to understand the words in the local dialect and their spiritual import. Though translators yearn to do a perfect translation, they fall short sometimes because there is no such thing as a perfect translation. There is no such thing as a perfect translation. Even bringing in the correct tonal texture or exact images is a challenge translators face, more so when it comes to translating a religious work with high spiritual import. It becomes almost an eternal impossibility as they are layered with significant connotations and original inflections of the source language. Though the English language doesn't or cannot convey the local flavor or showcase the pithiness and beauty of the original, yet the translation into English is important for any significant work to reach worldwide readership and to become a part of world literatures. Translating Bhakti literature can be called a journey into the past that brings us to the present and takes us to the future on the world literature's platform. Now I shall talk about the importance of translation. Any country's literary masterpieces can get universal reach and appreciation through translation, instead of remaining as just national literary narratives with restricted readership. Translation is a tool of comparative literature because it enables cross-cultural exchange, can help in analyzing literary trends and structures across different cultures, offering a deeper universal understanding of literature as a multifaceted phenomenon. It acts as a bridge between languages, allowing scholars and readers to enjoy and engage with literary works from different cultures, which they otherwise may never experience their beauty and literary worth. The universal perspectives, experiences, and themes can be understood better through translation, which enriches the minds of scholars and general readers too. Translation helps in exploration and expansion through broader literary and cultural interconnectedness. Probably that's why George Steiner, the Franco-American literary critic, rightly said, without translation, we would be living in provinces bordering on silence. Translation or transcreation is not a separate work of literary art because the religious, social, and cultural context of the original will be retained in the transcreation and translation. The peculiarities and musicality will be attempted, but may not be successful attempt, but to be transferred effectively, every translator will try. Translation, transcreation, retelling, call it by any name. This practice of transferring the content of one text to another text in a different language is a phenomenon which is quite ancient. The history of our Indian literature showcases a number of such works, and the mythological narratives like Ramayana and Mahabharata are retold so many times in a vast number of languages and culture specific dialects. This epic rewriting and retelling of religious devotional literature is a powerful genre by itself because of the wide scope it has, literally, culturally, and nationally, to disseminate and celebrate rich wealth of vernacular literature and mythological corpus. This genre of literature translation
आवाज आ रहा है
is, is very important and significant. As one famous translator put it, like a surrogate mother, bear the original and give it a form in a different text. Bear the original and give it a form in a different text. Though there is no creative freedom while handling the religious texts, the deep reflective enjoyment it gives has great potency. Any text based on religion, mythology, presents the translator with a mission that encompasses aesthetic and ethical criteria. Translation can be an enjoyable creative unfolding for a sincere practitioner, though translation is never easy and often translators have been described as traitors to the original. But if rightly understood, translation is an endless process. On the face of it, translation work appears easy and simple because many believe that there already is a text, then rewriting the same into another language must be very easy. This thought is far from reality. The moment you start a work of translation, that's the moment of commitment. Translation is not a mere linguistic activity involving only the brain. It is a literary, cultural, and creative activity that involves the aesthetics arising from a sensitive heart. As an interpreter, a translator has an important role to play in striking a harmonious relationship with the original first, and secondly, in being faithful to the soul of the work, in presenting it without any deviations. There'll be few words that are impossible to be translated into English, carrying the same beauty and lyrical quality. It is not easy to carry forward the cultural vocabulary as it is into English. So by adding phrases and words that denote the closest equivalent, these cultural demands can be taken care of. Translation is not merely a literary activity, but a cultural activity too, wherein the translator must assume the role of a cultural interpreter too, making the translation accessible and reader-friendly to all the readers. The Hindi phrase Swantaha Sukhaya, which means for one's own pleasure and satisfaction, was coined by the saint poet Tulsidas. He used it in Ramcharitmanas to describe his own reasons for retelling the story of Rama, though it had been told many times before. A translator must experience pleasure and satisfaction and must put in his or her best efforts to achieve the same through the art of translation or transcreation or retelling. Translation is a serious genre calling for very good skills and command, both in the source and target language. To catch the spirit, the climb, the nuances, the flavor of the original, and then transport them into the translation and present it to a different readership and audience is no small a task. Most importantly, it's just not the thought, but also the emotion the text exudes must be transported successfully because even the translation must produce the same emotive impact on the reader as the original did. This is where the genius of the translator comes into play. To read into the written text as also the unwritten implied text. Under an amazing concentration of the bhakti thought, saint poet Annamacharya, whose Sankirtana I had presented at the very beginning, he used expressions and idioms which are treasured gems. With his powerful command over the language of Telugu, he used many homonyms and synonyms, which unfortunately cannot be translated into English. When we, that is my co-translator Dr. Advitiya Dikshit and myself, started translating Annamacharya Sankirtanas into English, we realized that all translation is a compromise between the effort to be literal and the effort to be idiomatic. We found that the elegance, the sweetness, the lucidity of the Telugu language, the culture-specific terms, the idiomatic expressions, etc., are not easy to translate or transcreate into English. Annamacharya, with his command over Telugu language, spurred on by his great devotion to the Lord, used with great ease many idioms, whereas we were left with little choice of English words. For example, Annamaya used beautiful synonyms like Kamala, Aravinda, Padma, Jalaja, Sarasija, for which we could only use lotus everywhere. The constraint was inevitable. The idiomatic expression like Munjeti Kankanamu, Teppalatelu, etc. convey a defined context, which we transcreated by giving their meaning either in parentheses or in footnotes. When Annamacharya in a very poetic way says, Kamalapta Kula, we merely use the word of sun clan instead of elaborating on the exact meaning, which will read as the one born in the clan of the sun who is dear to the lotus. The one born in the clan of the one who is dear to the lotus. Such a long explanation for one small, beautiful expression, Kamalapta Kula. It is important to have practical knowledge of the source language. In translations, generally, the word Cupid will be used for Manmatha, but we prefer to use it as it is because we felt Cupid basically is from Greek mythology with a Greek equivalent Eros, and when used will bring to the mind a picture of a naked winged child carrying a bow. And may demagnetize the image of Manmatha, who is supposed to be very handsome and a personification of beauty and love. So it may demagnetize the image of Manmatha as we perceive from our Hindu mythological point of view. Some words, due to semantic changes over the years, may mean differently in the present context. To that they would have meant during the same poet's time. One such word is kampu, which the poet used it as a smell or fragrance. Whereas now, if we use it, it means only offensive smell. So a translator needs to take care of these things so as not to misrepresent the original. The fact that the target reader may not know the cultural vocabulary used by bhakti poets must be remembered by the translator. Hence, must use phrases and words in the target language which communicate the context, emotion, and feeling as best as possible. So that's what it is. I would like to end my speech with one more small verse. This is Sri Krishna Karnamritam, which I had translated using a link language. So it's also a very important aspect that we can use a link language and do justice to the original by picking up a very scholarly kind of book which represents the original in all its forms. So this is Sri Krishna Karnamritam. I'll read out the original and my English translation. I hope you'll enjoy it. Give me a second. Yeah, this is what it is. So, किमिव शृणुमः कस्य ब्रूमः कथं कृतमाशया कथयत कथं धन्या मन्यामहे हृदये सयम् मधुर मधुर स्मेराकारे मनोनयनोत्सवे कृपण कृपण कृष्णे तृष्णाचिरं तृष्णाचिरं बतलम्बते. So the poet Leela Sukha or the Bilva Mangala wrote such beautiful verses on Sri Krishna, eulogizing his childhood pranks and depicted him as a youthful, beautiful lad. So this particular verse I'll read out in English translation. The sweetest brilliant form is an eye festivity to the beholder's eyes. The sweetest brilliant form is an eye festivity to the beholder's eyes. The deep desire to behold that form with my own eyes is dangling in my heart since so long. How to satiate my heart? Whom to complain? Whom to ask for guidance? Elucidate, O learned ones. Is there any other blessed way to find him? Is there any other blessed way to find him and behold him to my heart's content? To behold him to my heart's content. So this is the beautiful verse from Krishna Karnamritam. And this is where I end my speech. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. The starting and the ending, the starting with Sankirtana was so melodious, and the ending was really, we enjoyed it. Thank you
so
for
much.
such a captivating lecture. Now, we will go to our next speaker, whom I would like to introduce in a very excellent way. I will try to, because she is really very special for all of us. Ma'am Laksmisree Banerjee, Professor Laksmisree Banerjee, who is a multi-award winning poet, a literature, and senior vocalist, a gold medalist and national scholar from Calcutta University, West Bengal. She has had an illustrious academic career as a university professor of English and Cultural Studies, and later as a Vice Chancellor. As an international senior Fulbright scholar in USA and Commonwealth scholar in UK, Professor Banerjee has taught and lectured at premier universities worldwide. She is the proud recipient of 2 International Lifetime Achievement Awards in Arts and Literature, as well as the prestigious UGC Postdoctoral Research Award for her groundbreaking work on comparative studies of world women poets. Her literary contributions are marked by 12 books of poetry and numerous academic publications widely published and globally anthologized. Her expertise and reputation have earned her a nomination by the President of India to serve on the board of Central Universities. Now, I would like to request Professor Laksmisree Banerjee for a very informative lecture. Ma'am, please. Ma'am, you are muted.
Can you hear me? You can hear me? These are just 2 or 3 lines. I wanted to just respond to Ambika's wonderful presentation. And yes, you're right. You know, I always, when I'm invited for translation studies, whether it's Sahitya Academy or elsewhere, I always say that, you know, language is a face of a culture. And like, I can't transpose, my face cannot become your face, nor can your face. So I always use the word transcreation. I mean, that's my, it's not that the whole world will, but I definitely postulate this kind of a viewpoint, and it was excellent. And you have to transcreate, because then it becomes a new entity with your own, you know, creativity. It is a transcreation, and it was wonderful. I mean, and talking about bhakti, now I'm going to talk about a Siya Bard, a Vishwa Kavi, who I really cannot, you know, compress within the constraints of time and space, though I will try my very best. Of course, I can't talk about the entire Tagore, nobody can. But I will try to make it as concise as possible. And the appropriation of Tagore within certain paradigms or within certain critical theories is not just a daunting task, it's an impossible one. And you can think that I think that I always, whenever they call me as a Tagore scholar, I say, I can't be a Tagore scholar. Nobody can. You know, I'm standing on the summit of a hill and I'm about to jump. That's the feeling I have. So please bear with me. I will try to, you know, there is time and space constraint, but I will try to. Because you see, when Nandita talked about humanism, naturalism, bhakti, romanticism, American transcendentalism, English romanticism, you talk of everything where the movement is from the ephemeral to the eternal. Nothing else comes to mind except those 20, you know, those 2040, you know, other than the novels and essays, we'll leave that apart, but the poetry. So it's very difficult, but I'm trying my best. I'm trying to give, you know. So I made a paper which I thought was too big, and then I again shortened it. So I don't know where I'll land up. But anyway, I'll try to do this, because Tagore is the interconnectivity, I think, of the entire human race of spiritualism and aestheticism. I also believe, I think Nandini knows, all of you, unless you are spiritualists, you cannot be aesthetics. I do not think anyone in the world can be an artist or an aesthetic without inbuilt spiritualism. That's a part of aestheticism. And of course, what to say of Tagore, we can't assess him. Anyway, but I have called it Tagore and Sufism for a better world. Now, today we are a conflict-ridden world. And Sufism is a word which in Arabic comes from the word Safa. Well, Safa is purity. And it also comes from the Greek mythology, Sophia or Sophia, which means wisdom. Okay. So I tried to integrate all these elements. I cannot actually do this, but I'm always doing it. I'm being asked to do it. So I'm very happy. I'm very, namaskar to Nandini. I mean, she's such a excellent human being. If before everything else, I always think about somebody in terms of the humanity that person has. Because if you're not a good human being, like Ambika herself, she's so soft spoken, she's such a human being that the rest will come. The rest, in any case, will come. Without being humane, without being spiritual, we cannot achieve this. We cannot. So thanks a lot to Nandini Sahu, the Honorable Vice Chancellor and Hindi University, and Paromita, and of course Ambika, for giving me a time where I'm trying to do my best to compress. There is a time and space constraint. So I'll do it. I shortened it, but anyway, in our contemporary world, where nothing but turmoil prevails, with a simultaneous yearning for peace and democracy, it becomes almost imperative today for public intellectuals, for thinkers, for writers, for peace-loving, action-oriented people to seriously rethink and reconfigure Tagore within the larger context of Sufism as a positive uh, avenue to world peace. It must be admitted that the appropriation and the understanding of Tagore within the parameters of any specific concept, theory, or interpretation of his multifaceted creativity is not just a daunting task, but quite an impossible one. Okay, now there are many scholars, there are many singers, writers, and the common lovers of art and culture who are deeply enthused and permeated, inspired by the rapturous impact of Tagore's deeply enthused, permeated, and inspired by the rapturous impact of Tagore's Sufi music and poetry being performed, practiced, and transcreated across the globe. The starting point would always be Tagore's 1915 translation of the 100 Songs of Kabir, who was an Indian Sufi poet, in 1915, soon after his Nobel Prize in 1913. Kabir, a celebrated Indian mystic and Sufi poet of the 15th century, has almost the same spiritual vision of the indivisible union of the creator and the created, the unity of diverse human cultures, the melodies of not just soul, the melodies of the soul and the senses. These melodies of the soul and the senses do not come into the Western world of Christianity or even in the Islamic world. They are mutually opposed, even warring concepts. Soul and sense, they are mutually opposed. But in our Bhakti cult, in the Sufi cult, where the Islamic people do not consider the Sufi people to be Islamic at all. But if you take the Bhakti cult, if you take the Sufi cult, if you take Vaishnavite culture, this is all one and the same thing. So we can talk about Amir Khusro, for example. Now, when we talk about Hinduism, why do we forget our culture? Amir Khusro, a Persian poet and musician, was the father of Hindustani classical music. He lived in India and he lived in Afghanistan. Amir Khusro, I mean, Kabir himself. So when we compare all these poets, I mean, even the American transcendentalists, when Tagore was growing up, Emerson and Thoreau were being, read across the world. The American transcendentalists is one and the same thing. The English romantics, it's one and the same thing. So Tagore writes, the infinite dwelling of the infinite being is everywhere, in earth, water, sky, and air. He who is within is also without. I see him and I see none else. This translation by Tagore of Kabir's essential spiritualism and cosmology is also the crux of a definitive denotation of Tagore's own philosophy of life and poetic practice. It is this deep perception of the ecstatic unity, the unity of love, life, light, and devotion, makes Tagore's translation of Kabir perhaps much more authentic, much more meaningful than that of Robert Bly. Robert Bly had done it, but obviously he was a Westerner. But when Tagore translated 100 poems of Kabir, it was as if he was himself, It is the same thing, And in the introduction to this book, which is Tagore's prose translations called Song Offerings of Gitanjali, Evelyn Underhill writes that the trend of Tagore's mystical genius makes him a peculiarly sympathetic interpreter of Kabir's poems. The testimony of the greatest mystics to divinity and to the powers of life and energy becomes our oxygen. So the first poem of Gitanjali, we can see this connectivity between, as I said, the supernal and the temporal, the atemporal and the temporal. And it is this interconnectivity, but in a very different context. If you may recall, T.S. Eliot had said in his famous poem, Tradition and Individual Talent, he talks of a poetic consciousness which is unbreakable and which flows in continuity like a river through the ages. We poets are not writing in a vacuum. Somewhere in a very subterranean way, we have absorbed poetry through the ages. And that is what T.S. Eliot says, and that is what many people say. So this river of life is also the river of poetry. And the first poem of Tagore's prose translation, Song Offerings, takes us into this endlessness, the ceaselessness of life. There is no death. I believe death is an aberration. Life is the truth. There is nothing but life and light. So Tagore writes in his first of the 103 translations, his own translations of his own Gitanjali. Thou hast made me endless. Such is thy pleasure. This frail vessel thou emptiest again and again, and fillest it ever with fresh life. This little flute of a reed thou hast carried over hills and dales, and has breathed through it melodies eternally new. Thy infinite gifts come to me only on these very small hands of mine. Ages pass, and still thou pourest and still there is room to fill. So this endlessness of life, this endlessness of the transcendental is what, if we talk of Khalil Gibran, if we talk of Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi, there's so much of affinity between Tagore and Rumi, you know. So Andrew Harvey writes, the testimony of the greatest mystics to divinity and to the powers of life and energy becomes our oxygen and becomes the force of truth that keeps us working. So I will now talk about Sufism, which is again relatable to Romanticism, to Transcendentalism. Sufism, in its broadest context, is grounded in the sublime connectivity between the human and the cosmic consciousness, a harmonization built on the principles of love and universal brotherhood, something which we need so much in this contemporary world, so war-torn, so shredded with, disharmony and discord. This is what we need. Sufism in the larger sense of being. So it is about universal brotherhood, negating all man-created bristling borders. It is very much akin and well comparable in many of its bristling facets, in many of its facets, to negate all man-created bristling borders. Now, whether we talk of Yeats, or we talk of Wordsworth or Shelley, or we talk of Whitman, Emerson, or Thoreau, of American transcendentalists, or we talk of the Upanishads, which was Tagore's guiding light, the Bhakti, the Vaishnavite movements, these can all be under this umbrella term, which I have used as Sufism. Sufism is not about any specific religion. It is not about any specific religion. So even the Vaishnavite movement comes under Sufism. Okay. The cultural pluralism and accompanying fusion of the erotic and the ecclesiastical. Sometimes we read Tagore and we think this poem has come under Prem. And then suddenly we look up and we find that poem is under Puja. And then we read some other poem which we think must be Puja. And then we look up and we find it is Prem. So this kind of interchangeability is not there in the Western world. They are warring concepts. I mean, for example, our temple structures. People from abroad, they will say, why is there so much erotica? On the temple facades, you have erotica. But that is the central seed, the kind of capsule from which creation takes its birth. So when we see the erotica on the facades of temples, a Westerner will not understand it. When we go into the sanctum sanctorum, then they are pacified. They say, okay, here there is God. But that is not God. For them, that is not God. But for us, that creativity is also God. We don't, it's the same thing. So Sufism goes far beyond traditional religious strictures. We, if we really understand Hinduism and not try to be the big saints of Hinduism as we have today, there are so many people to talk about Hinduism, but they don't understand it is Sanatanism and it is actually the eternal religion of man. It is the eternal religion of man. It embraces every possible aspect of life and super life. Okay. So we have, I will now go to Tagore straight away. I don't think I have so much time. During Tagore's third visit to London, there's a very, I don't know whether that's a very interesting story. When Tagore was going to London to Rothenstein's house, where the best poets of that time were present in Rothenstein's house, on the way in the London tube, he lost his Gitanjali, which he was translating in the ship, and he lost it in the London tube. And he was, he had done those prose translations. And by a stroke of great luck, that notebook of Tagore was found in the London Tube Baker station. And nobody knew that history was in the making. Because if that translation of that 103 translations were not found, and if one old lady found it and kept it in the left luggage, but nobody knew that history of this Nobel Prize was in the making, because the best poets of that time were in Rothenstein's house, and then that diary was found. That is history in the making. So, in the presence of W.B. Yeats, Ezra Pound, T.S. Moore, and so many others, he just read his poems, not thinking about anything. But his poems were found. That is a great stroke of destiny. An interesting story which I have already talked to you about. Hence began the glorious journey of Tagore's Gitanjali, and he was the first Asian to receive the Nobel Prize in 1913. And we are very, I don't know why, he was very, maybe hurt, because the Bengalis of that time in Calcutta, they knew only Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Something like Shakespeare. Tagore was a bard, but a bard of a little second grade bard, So once the Nobel Prize came to him, the entire Calcutta ran to him to garland him, but he didn't accept a single garland. And he gave the acceptance of his Nobel Prize speech 8 years after getting it. He was so hurt that why are these people, just because I get a Nobel Prize, I didn't want a Nobel Prize, but it happened to me. But anyway, the understanding of Gitanjali would remain totally incomplete without quoting just a few lines from W.B. Yeats's introduction to these song offerings. He was spellbound with this Oriental mysticism. I will not call it Indian mysticism. This is the total Oriental ethos, which is very different from the Western Occidental ethos. And Yeats writes, these prose translations of Tagore's poetry have stirred my blood as nothing has for years. To read one line of his is to forget the troubles of the world. And then he says, these lyrics are full of the subtlety of rhythm. I have carried the manuscript of these translations, reading it in railway stations, on top of omnibuses and restaurants. This is the work of a supreme culture. This is the work of a supreme culture, but they yet appear as much the growth of the common soil as the grass and the rushes. These verses will not lie in little well-printed books upon ladies' generation, upon ladies' tables, or be carried by students at the university to be laid aside. But as generations pass, travelers will hum them on the highways, and men rowing boats upon rivers will sing them. At every moment, the heart of this poet will flow outwards to these with great humanity and without any derogation. And the most fundamental point of Gitanjali is that it is not merely a spiritual or mystic record of poetic salutations to an external God who sits apart in a religious temple. Tagore says, go not to the temple. He is not an external God who sits apart in a religious temple, oblivious of life, humanity, and nature and its infinite manifestations. Nor is it a series of holy prayers to some segregated divinity who is unaware of the world of tumultuous human affairs, of infinite bliss and searing agony. The song offerings is the product of a transcendental, poetic, life-imbued imagination and a unified sensibility. What I said, melodies of the soul and the senses. Desire is not away. It is desire which brings forth creativity. So it is a world of multifarious colors, of physical effervescence, and also the supreme cosmic consciousness. This unified sensibility is evident, for example, in poem number 27. Oh, says Tagore, where is the light? Always he's looking inside. Oh, where is the light? Kindle it with the burning fire. Kindle the light with the burning fire of desire. Let not the hours pass by in the dark. Kindle the lamp of love with thy inner life. We need to recognize while reading Tagore this poetic, sublime dichotomy. We need to recognize this duality in which Tagore proclaims his belief in a personal God, a supreme faith and celebration of that capital O, oneness, the Rig Veda. In the beginning, there was nothing but that one. There is no naming. Whoever that one, O-N-E, the Upanishads, there is no naming. So, he believes in a personal God, a supreme faith and celebration of that oneness, which without negating the sensorial or sensual experiences of the phenomenal world of nature and humanity, elevates us to the sphere of divine stasis. It is a gift of both solace and tranquility to appease and assuage and tranquilize a conflict-ridden, turbulent world. For this sage bard, I call Gurudev a sage seer bard, who has, through his stupendous work of love, mysticism, art, creativity, he has delved into the inner, capital I, self, capital self, and invokes the connectivity between the ephemeral and the eternal. The connectivity between the ephemeral and the eternal, between earth and the ethereal and ether, between the natural and the supernatural, and most significantly, between the human and the divine. What in Tagore, in one word, I always put it in one phrase, his humanization of the divine and the divinization of the human. That is the totality, the interconnectedness in which the entire world lives, but does not know or does not wish to know. So I will just put an end to this. I mean, I can go on and on, but I don't want to. So the last part is what I said, the humanization of God and the divinization of man. Aham Brahmasmi. Hmm? The centrifugal strength or the pivotal force of godhood embedded right within the human self. When we say namaskar, people don't explain it to the Westerner. When we say namaskar, what a beautiful way of saying that I bow to the God within you. I bow to the God within you. Okay. From his original manuscript, Tagore says, "Thou art the sky, and thou art the nest as well." Mark Tagore's words. Thou art the sky, and thou art the nest as well. O thou beautiful, there in the nest I find the love of colors and sounds and odors. Deliverance is not for me in renunciation. Look at Tagore saying, deliverance is not for me in renunciation. I feel the embrace of freedom in the 1,000 bonds of delight. Thou ever pourest for me the fresh draught of thy nectar of various colors and fragrance, filling this earthen vessel to the brim. And this ascendancy, it is an ascension from the world of forms to the world of formlessness. From the world of forms to that of formlessness is also what we say, what Keats says, for example. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all he know on earth and all he need to know. What does Shelley say? The, what's it? I'm forgetting it. The desire of the moth for the star, of the night for the morrow. It's the same thing. The desire of the moth for the star and night for the morrow. And it is the same thing. Love, truth, and God. Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Okay. So we are connected. How can we be disconnected? Okay. So when he says, thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure, and I do not seek deliverance through renunciation. I think that is the crux, the essence of Tagore. I mean, we can go on reading Tagore for our entire lives, and we find him like the flute of Krishna. It can be like Radha, the Radha Krishna, the sensuality as well as the transcendentalism. We find everything there. I feel, all of the trends of literature are amalgamated in Tagore. And I am very happy to be invited for any Tagore lecture, though I'm a very small, I can't even describe, I can't even understand half of what I'm saying. But thank you, Nandini, and thank you, Hindi University. Thank you, Ambika. Thank you, Paramita. Thank you, all of you who are listening to me. I tried my best because it's a very daring task. It's a very daring task. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such a thought-provoking lecture, ma'am. And now I will request Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am, for a very significant remarks. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Paramita. Two very, very thought-provoking lectures indeed. I had a wonderful time and learning experience last 1.5 hours probably. Okay, so Dr. Ambika Ananth, her presentation was simple yet critical and very, very pertinent, timely. She talked about translation as a phenomenal experience. I caught that word from her, that it's a phenomenal experience. Yes, when you do a fulfilling translation, probably you feel phenomenal about yourself, isn't it? And as a practicing translator, she has spoken it. She hasn't theorized when he said that it's a phenomenal experience. It's from her own experience that she said. But a perfect translation is near impossible. I agree with you, because I was trying to translate some seminal texts from Odia to English, and I could never be satisfied with what I did, so I never published it. I'm still working on them. I don't know if I will ever be in a mental preparedness to publish them. So translation is near impossible. There is nothing like perfect translation. Uh, for example, my story collection, Shedding the Metaphors, it has been translated by two people, and both the translations are so different, one man and one woman. So when the woman translated it, the gender perspective vis-a-vis a woman was very clear, and when a man translated it, it was a bit of more objective, if I can use the word. Though I preferred the woman's translation because she spoke from a woman's point of view. And then, so, also you talked about Franco-American literary critics. You theorized, you authenticated what you said. And then Shwanto Sukhaya, yes, we work for our own happiness, for our own pleasure. When people work for being successful, maybe that doesn't make the work so perfect when they work for their own happiness. And then you spoke about the dichotomy between literal and idiomatic translation. Translations can be varieties. So, Paramita is a teacher of translation studies. In the classroom, they have been teaching translation theory. So, she will agree with you certainly that there is a dichotomy between literal translation and idiomatic translation, which you very clearly pointed out. And then translating bhakti literature is not simple, isn't it? Because bhakti literature has devotion, it has vernacularity, it has performance, even it has resistance. And then the bhakti poets, whether they are Kabir, Mirabai, Tukaram, Andal, or any of them, they speak in idioms which are rooted in local ecologies, oral translation, even caste politics. Somewhere you hinted at that, even caste politics. And then they're embodied in spirituality, and they defy the homogenizing tendencies of translation, rendering their songs into English or even into another Indian language. It risks flattering the radical immediacy. So we need not flatter the original writer, rather, you should bring about the best possible and the spirit of the original writer, which you emphasized. And then also, you hinted at the performative tendencies of bhakti literature. They are more for performance than for reading writing. That's what I understood as a folklorist. And the semantic richness of the metaphors that emerge from lived social contexts, agrarian, gendered, idiomatic, so many things that you talked about. And translation becomes an act of negotiation between fidelity and transformation. So even in the next lecture, Laksmisree ma'am talked about transcreation, transliteration, rather than just lexicon after lexicon translation. And the translator must grapple with questions of untranslatability. When you said that there is nothing like perfect translation, this question came to my mind, the question of untranslatability. And as a creative writer and as a teacher and a poet, I don't believe that anything is untranslatable. One can always make an attempt, go near the author, because without, in the beginning, when you sang a very beautiful song in, in Telugu, I could understand that I don't understand the language, but I could understand that it's related to bhakti literature because I already knew your topic. But yes, an onlooker may not be able to know. So translation is a must. Without translation, probably the world would be a place where every community stands alone. We know each other through translation. If you look at travel literatures, you look at travel literatures before, say, 500 years or 1000 years, even then they used to translate. And the very act of speaking started with translating the natural phenomena. We started speaking. Somebody asked me the other day, how did we start speaking, or uh, how did we create the words? I showed him some research which says that human beings started speaking by translating nature, by imitating the birds, how they twitter by imitating the animals, even the sound of the wind, the sound of everything, everything that is natural. So we translated nature in the beginning of humanity, thus we got into writing and speaking. So in this sense, translating bhakti literature is not only a philological task, you are doing a philological task. In fact, next time I'll ask Paromita, in your CV she should add philologist. So translation is not just a philological task, but it's also a critical inquiry into the voices which are preserved, which are silenced, and the devotional expressions, they continue to challenge the modern categories of literature, religion, politics. We have categorized so much. But as a translator, you helped us to blur the boundaries between philology, literature, religion, thinking, rethinking, orality, and whole lot of things. At a later stage, I will definitely talk to you about your research, and I will try to know more so that we can include you somewhere in our syllabus. I would particularly take care of that.
Thank
And
you so
now
much.
coming to the yes, welcome, very much welcome. And next coming to Professor Laksmisree Banerjee, a very beautiful presentation once again, as expected from her. Well, nothing less is expected from Laksmisree Madam. So, in comparative world literature, when you read through an entangled lenses of being a Tagorean. She claimed several times that I am not a Tagorean, I am not an expert of Tagore. That shows her humility, her humbleness, definitely. So she talked about Sufism that comes from the word safa, cleansing your heart, clearing yourself. And then she connected Sufism with Romanticism, naturalism, humanism, and then Amir Khusro, Islamic traditions, American transcendentalism as a true English teacher. She took us off and on into the boundaries of theorization, and then when your brain is getting too heavy with theorization, she brought us back to again pure poetry. Again, she took us back to theorization. So this, going and coming back from theory to poetry, poetry to theory. This poetry theory symbiotic expression in Lakshmi Banerjee's expression was something that I really liked. And Sufism, with its mystical interiority and poetics of transcendence, destabilizes the rationalist and materialist frameworks of naturalism, while Romanticism's valorization of imagination and subjectivity, these things resonate yet appropriate Sufi tropes of ecstasy and longing. And Lakshmishree Madam pointed out that longing and ecstasy is very much there in the poetry of Tagore, who was influenced by Sufism, no doubt. Then she pointed out to humanism, particularly in its European Enlightenment articulation, and then she foregrounded that the dignity of man remains complicit in colonial universalism. Thereby, we flatten the subaltern metaphysics of non-Western traditions. So we have to read Tagore very carefully. We cannot put Tagore on the boundaries of colonialism or post-colonialism or pre-colonialism. Rather, it's better to read Tagore as as a humanist rather than as a feminist or a colonialist or a post-colonialist, and trying to, put some theoretical tags on Tagore. That's what she discussed. And then Tagore occupies a crucial mediatory and disruptive role because his poetry and prose, they absorb romanticist aesthetics. Then they reframe Sufi mysticism into a modern idiom of universal love. They challenge the determinism of naturalism through a humanist spirituality. Then Indian Bhakti and Baul continuum. I'm doing some research on Baul literature. Already I had a research publication on Baul literature and how Tagore was influenced by Lalan Fakir. And Madam talked about all those things like the Maner Manush concept, somebody who is close to your heart. And Tagore emphasized that so much. And yet, Tagore's international reception also illustrates this symmetry of comparative literary circulation. That is why we will definitely take Tagore's literature in a big way in our syllabus when we design it. The East is celebrated only when it echoes Western categories of the sublime, of the universal. But Lakshmishree Madam pointed that we have to read Tagore from Eastern mindset, under the Eastern eye, if I can quote unquote Chandra Talpade Mohanty, not under the Western eye, but under the Eastern eye, we have to read Tagore. Eastern mysticism is something that is found in the writings of Tagore. A lot of people claim that Tagore was very Eurocentric, and W.B. Yeats and T.S. Eliot, and a lot of people have written their introduction, they have translated, so on and so forth. While as a student of English literature, I truly admire the translations and the introductions, the preface, and all that critical work done on Tagore by the Westerners. I definitely appreciate that. But I cannot fail to see that Eastern mysticism in the writings of Tagore. I am a serious Tagorean, though I'm not an expert, but I'm a Tagorean. I follow a lot of Tagore's literature. I see myself in many of his characters. I read Gora and all those novels again and again, and every time I find some new thing in those. So, madam, thanks a lot for talking to us about Tagore and your expertise vis-a-vis Tagorean studies. We will carry this further. We will have more such lectures with both of you. Now I leave it to Paromita with my gratitude to both the speakers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're honored.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And
Thank you a lot.
And for our participants, I would love to say that please send your questions, if you have any, to our Hindi University mail address, and we would love to share it with our speakers. And now, as we came to the end of our webinar today, so before we go, I would like to thank to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. A big thank to our distinguished speakers, Professor Laksmisree Banerjee, ma'am, and Ambika Ananth, ma'am. And a special thanks to lovely participants and team Hindi University. Thank you, namaskar, and have a very good day.
Thank you. Namaskar.